Hey everybody, welcome to News from Heaven. This is the show where we try to figure out life and the mind by taking an annotated journey through the writings of Emanuel Swedenborg. And today we're going to be looking at how spirits confuse our thoughts. Why are you looking at me like that? What we're going to start with is how we become confused, the spirit perpetrators, and are we dealing with some kind of bad angels here? So what we also do as we explore these relatively out there things is we're trying to figure out, how do we lift the dark clouds of the mind? I know you do too. At least at times I know I do. Walk around with all kinds of negative thoughts and feelings pouring into us. There's critiques of who we are, of where we're going, of what we've done. There's fears and anxieties and all this stuff. And through this spiritual material, particularly Swedenborg's writings in this case, we can lift those clouds. I find this has worked for me. I'm hoping it works for you. What are we trying to lift this week? You share it in the comments. I'm telling you, man, sharing is caring. And the more that people put out what's going on for them, the more other people can look and, oh, I'm dealing with the same thing, or I can offer some help, or that sort of thing. It's part of the community. But today, we're especially relevant to these dark clouds because when we're talking about spirits confusing the thoughts, we are learning, why are these dark clouds here in the first place, and why do they so deeply mess with us? Like and subscribe if you haven't already. This is really important to getting this show going. Where else could you find programming like this where you have circled clouds on a drawing, right? You got to support it, like and subscribe. Okay, our journey begins today in Swedenborg's Journal of Spiritual Experiences, which he never published, but don't worry, we got a hold of it, and now we're broadcasting it to the world. I don't think he would mind. And he titled each entry, this is actually an early one, where he said, about the disturbance of my understanding due to the dissension of spirits. And already we've got a headline here, because he's talking about his understanding, meaning his ability to think. When they say, oh, you ate the wrong thing for breakfast, now you can't concentrate much because of your blood sugar. But he is linking the disturbance of the understanding due to the dissension of spirits. So already we've got somehow spirits are linked to these dark clouds. And this gets into Swedenborg's explanation for the subconscious and the mind, the thing that we're still all struggling in the modern world to figure out how to deal with, and why we have to be stuck with this thing in the first place. No offense to the mind. Here's a little insight into the mechanics behind how it is to be a person. He says, sometimes spirits were granted the opportunity or freedom. Whenever he talks about something like that, being granted, this is none other than God. This is the divine saying, I'm going to tip the scales of the divine design in some way so that a certain event that needs to occur is given the opportunity to occur. Granted the opportunity or freedom to disagree about some matter. To the point, and this is a really extreme disagreement, that one held a different opinion than the other. Yeah, of course. So, here you have spirits disagree, right? Well, we better, if we're going to talk about it, we might as well draw them. As we all know, this is how spirits look. You got a couple of spirits here, and they are being allowed to disagree. There's chaos in the middle where they say, I think it's this way. No, it's this way. No, you're wrong. Oh, yeah, really? Then how come? Right? You've been there. This very readily happens when there is a light slackening of bonds and freeing from constraints. So there's some kind of system in play. If you think about the Lord running the entire human race in a system in which, like an ecosystem, where forces have to be balanced. And we see this as we humans are graciously kind of pulling apart the threads that make up ecosystems around the world. You get rid of the salmon, that gets rid of the bears, which actually the salmon, the bears were dragging that which into the forest, which led to the nutrients that allowed the trees to grow, so the whole forest is in decline. Everything has got to be in the right balance in order to create this space in which all organisms can thrive. It's the same way with the whole human race and the way we think and feel. So you have these spirits that have to, while they're given a free life just like we all are, there's a constraints, there is a shepherding and a moving in such a way that they can continue to exist and allow space for everyone to exist. And the controls are being moved here for some reason, and that has this cascading impact on, well, we'll see what it's on. Then instantly, my mind becomes so confused that I understand almost nothing of what lies hidden in the more inward level of meaning of the word, which was his big study. He was writing Secrets of Heaven as this was going on. So what you had before being some spirits arguing somehow, I think I already used the word cascades. Let's do it again. Cascades down into, and this is a pretty accurate depiction of how he looked, Swedenborg. Somehow them arguing there affects Swedenborg's ability to think. Because we're not, when you look back at why am I in this world where there's these, we're getting way overboard with the annotations. Why am I in this world where there are negative thoughts and feelings coming at me? Why do I have this confusing mental landscape in the first place? Swedenborg says it's not just us in isolation, that there is a whole spiritual world connected to us. And it's such an immediate connection that while Swedenborg had this distinct, clear perception, he could see A to B, that these spirits that I was somehow in association with started to argue, and that made it so I couldn't think. We don't see that, but we sure do feel the effects of that. So right away, the first takeaway is, it's not just because, the reason you're confused is not just because you're stupid, or everyone else can understand something you don't understand, which is certainly what your negative thoughts would want to tell you. But no, we're in a big, long chain, and if our supply is somehow cut off, we're going to suffer for it. Plot thickens. It is as if darkness comes over the understanding and blots out the light, which actually could be literally true, because there's God streaming in with understanding. And if these spirits create enough of a ruckus just in the way that the hierarchy is kind of set up, I know it's not a very good word for that, but it could make it so you're actually getting a little eclipse of the mind, because in the way the system is set up, it's divine, then spiritual, then natural. There's a cloud in the spiritual that can affect what we pick up. I have experienced this several times with great indignation. This is Swedenborg saying, hey, it's not that he was all zen and that's fine if that. He was mad. And why was he mad? Because he felt like his ability to do something good for the human race was being impeded. For sometimes spirits reasoning together, who can be called reasonings. Interesting here that because in the spirit, your mental activity, what you think and where motives are really the core essence of you. So if you're doing all this reasoning about stuff, you could call somebody a reasoning. And I know that you might think reasoning has a pretty good connotation these days. This is translated from, I think his journal was in Swedish. Was it in Latin? It was in Swedish. It doesn't matter. It was in some language where they had to translate it. This word usually has a negative connotation, that this he would associate with spurious reasoning, or the ability to just argue whatever you wanted, or one that Swedenborg would often go after is just make endless arguments and devolve into philosophical discussions, so you get so convoluted that you don't actually get anywhere. Because Swedenborg ran in those circles with these philosophers who would take something like the human spirit and just think it away so that they couldn't believe it could exist, but then also that it would have to be something so insubstantial that it would be as if nothing. Same thing with life after death, and all the things that people kind of instinctively know are true, they would kind of block their mind out. And this reasoning was a big problem when it gets used in a negative sense. Who can be called reasonings, but want to be hailed as angels of understanding. So these are bad angels. So there's some spirits somewhere, right? I know you're having to endure a lot of stick figures in this episode. There's just nothing anybody can do about it. So these spirits want to be called. Why'd you draw an arrow right in the middle there? They want to be called angels, and that is because angel is not some separate class of being. This is a state of mind. And these spirits think, yeah, I'm so good at thinking that I gotta be an angel. Swedenborg says, no, these are because you're not using your thinking to apply to goodness and truth, it's just reasonings. And whenever we're describing the behavior of someone else, look for it in yourself. When am I just going around in circles about something versus I'm trying to get something constructive done? When is the monkey mind running me versus the monkey mind getting something done? We want to be hailed as angels of understanding. They're given the opportunity to dispute among themselves. So it sounds like they can't always do it. Maybe because, I don't know if you've ever met the type who would just love to argue with anyone about anything for as long as they can possibly argue. I may have met a few of them online. No offense. I'm sure I'm bad at it too. But when they're given the opportunity to argue like this, right? When they really, I can go at it with you, whatever conditions need to be met for that to happen. There's a chain of events. And actually, this is fascinating because he says, from this, a turmoil arises among lower spirits that utterly confuses the mind and utterly deprives it of the light of truth. So here you have these reasoning spirits, they're arguing about something, and somehow they have influence. There's some kind of leader group to the spirits below. Do we ever see that in the world, where if you've got somebody in a position where they've got a pulpit of some kind where a lot of people hear them, then they can really lead groups of people astray. Somehow, those spirits arguing causes a tumult among these spirits. These guys are riled up, it riles up these guys, and that somehow gets into Swedenborg's mind and causes this darkness. So you're always part of the larger human race. I mean, we can certainly see that ripple through the way we think about stuff. What people are saying on the TV changes what your neighbor is then saying and posting on Facebook. We are influenced by people on earth, and it's just Swedenborg's concept of the spiritual cause of mental phenomena is just that it just goes in all directions. It's not just horizontal. It's in the fourth dimension, whatever you would do to indicate you're going in a spiritual direction from a physical starting point. That Swedenborg this is early in his journey, and he is just learning there's way more to the mind than just the enclosed world in the skull. And actually, this really makes the picture for me. And what do I know? I'm some weirdo on the internet, but for me, this is a more satisfying picture of the mental landscape than just the idea that I'm sitting here isolated, and yet I have all these things coming in and seemingly with intent, messing with me, or I don't know why something isn't clear to me or what causes mental weather, that there is a spiritual component. I'm not saying that there's not neurotransmitters and all that and that they're not part of that cascade, but they're part of the cascade. To me, to be able to say, okay, this cloud that's in my mind right now is coming from somewhere that I can just dismiss rather than, oh, there's something wrong with me because it's here. When I try that out, it's just like that meditation technique. When a thought comes in, watch it go by like a cloud rather than, oh, it's true, I'm terrible, my mom and dad were right. Sorry, mom and dad, no, you never said nothing mean to me. We have back to the story. We have Swedenborg utterly deprived of the light of truth, blocked out, eclipsed by this big spiritual argument here. This is a severe trial. He's talking about the impact on him. When the mind is concentrated on the necessity of thinking. Sometimes it's important to think. Demanded, and so this is why this bothered Swedenborg so much. Demanded by one's conscience, which I could not resist. So his conscience, his set sense of right and wrong, which Swedenborg says hell is always trying to disrupt your sense of right and wrong, is saying that he needs to be thinking right now because he needs to be writing these books that eventually will lead to Swedenborg and Life, the show. No, I'm sure that's not the crowning achievement of his. He's like, oh, if I had known, I never would have wrote the books. And at the same time, one seems to lose all patience, and one's mind is anguished by the fear of overlooking that obligation. So because of this argument in the spiritual world, Swedenborg feels like I should be helping more, but now I can't because my mental faculty is not working. So you see just how much it messes up when there's this. If these guys up here, not to harp on them, but if they were actually acting like angels, and instead of just arguing to win arguments, we're arguing to find out what's right, and we're actually trying to dissect things with a use rather than just to bolster their debate performance rating, then they would have a positive inflow, that they would influence these people, which would influence Swedenborg's ability to think, and this whole thing, it's all pollution, the negativity there goes downstream and affects other people. You ever feel like you're just having negativity dumped into you? This has consequences, so don't put trash in the spiritual storm drain. This takes place also for the reasons that the Spirit's centered on the understanding. Okay, if you're still here, it's because you think this isn't that weird and technical, so I'm going to get rid of you here in the last 5 minutes here. This takes place also for the reason that the Spirit's centered on the understanding. So let's start color coding, people. Well, the Spirit's centered on the understanding want to be distinguished from reasoning ones, so we've got reasoning spirits, thus to be called angels, when yet they are also spirits, and really the least intelligent when they are left to themselves. Okay, I have in my contract that I can draw 3 more stick people before this episode is over, and I'm going to use every single one of those. So, spirit centered on the understanding, let's have them in blue here. So we've got a spirit centered on the understanding. Then we've got some kind of reasoning spirit, which, as I said, is this negative connotation. This is some kind of, you're just wasting time. But then they want to be called angels. And these are just, you could be all 3 of these in one day. We probably are. I probably have been these 3 throughout this episode. You want to be, these guys want to be distinguished. No, we're not just thinking for no reason. Look, we're angelic, meaning what? What does it mean to be angelic? What's the difference besides the color of highlighter? Maybe there will be a clue in these last sentences. But they are angels when, what do you have to do to become an angel? What is the requirements? Is it unfair? Can most of us not afford it? When they let themselves be governed by God, the Messiah. So the difference between these 3 is that God is trying to stream into everything. And you might think, what are you talking about by God? Really, you can think of it as love and universal love. So this would be the anti-ego impulse. And the truth. And if it's not that you know the truth, it's you desire to have the truth. Rather than, I know how I can win this argument, or I know how I can imagine this situation or justify it in order to get a satisfying feeling about my own actions. If you're really looking for what is really best for everyone here, that's letting that in and letting it lead you. But if you're just reasoning, if you're just saying, the difference is I just want to get what I want. It doesn't matter what's true, and it sure doesn't matter how everyone else is doing. I just want what I want. That's these reasoning spirits. But the vacillation has to do with this yellow's coming in. What do we do with it? And every time we let it govern us, what we know is what our conscience is, like we were talking before, our sense of what's right and wrong, whenever that governs us, then we're moving in the angelic direction. And whenever we're genuinely looking for the truth because we're trying to serve what's right, you're moving in the angelic direction. About this fact, I spoke with them today. So Swedenborg is not just looking through binoculars, and that's weird that you guys are like that. He actually was able to talk to the spirits that were interfering with his thinking. And this is how he got to be such a luminary that we would bother doing all these shows about what he wrote, because he was able to not just identify what the source of spiritual phenomena was, and know when and where it was blocking the light, because the design is that you may think I'm sitting here and, getting these negative thoughts. It just seems like if you've experienced having a mind, which I would call depression at times and anxiety, all these things that come with the mental landscape, it just seems like there's a crowd. You don't think of it like this, you just think of it as thoughts, but it seems like there's a crowd around you that's just throwing stones at you. They're just criticizing you, or get like, hey, worry about this thing. What if this bad thing happens? Can you believe that this is a possibility? Remember that time you did something bad? It just seems like all around you there are these anti-friends. But the truth is that there is so much love coming in towards everybody all the time. That this is divine love. And the truth is trying to tell you, you're great, you're fine, but it gets blocked out by this noise. And what Swedenborg was able to do is learn, what's this interference, what's the nature of it, why is it here, and how do I get rid of it, and see lucidly where that confusion comes from. Because it's not that you think it's a neutral line that we start at, where, we'll see if I'm a valuable person or not based on what I do. We'll see if things go well based on how they're going well. Things are going well. This yellow is serious business, and it's the truth that you're headed to a great place. You are just right. You're just valuable enough. Your life is going well, believe it or not. But the only way we could get anywhere other than believing that is if there's actually this interference. And the interference is coming from this huge spiritual pollution that Swedenborg is describing here. So he's talking to these spirits. They were very indignant. They didn't want to hear that. Like, I don't want, led by God, I don't. And if you're indignant at the idea of that led by God may be a phrase that you don't feel that great about because God has had such a bad PR team in a lot of cases, but led by goodness and truth, led by love, led by humility, if that stuff, if you really don't like that, which at times I'm in a state where I don't, that's a good time for me to check and say, well, okay, is there room for improvement in me here? That's a good litmus test for this state. It was proven to them by an actual experience. So somehow Swedenborg is able to come in and show them, look, when you let God lead things, it's not just because it's some kind of moral slap on the wrist. It's because when you let God lead things, that's what allows God to get rid of these dark clouds, because those latch on to all of our ego and ambition and those sorts of things, but instead come in with the truth, which then gives us all the peace and happiness and everything we were hoping to find in our pursuits of everything else. That's when you know you're on the right track. And that's the news from heaven. How'd it go? Did you like it at all? Did it work for you? How was your mood? Let me know in the comments. Did watching this do anything to improve your mental landscape? Is this bizarre concept of spirits talking about spirits and it confuses the thoughts? Does that picture of the mind, does it give you anything you feel like you can use this week? What would you do with it? Do you have any techniques or thoughts I didn't have? Put it all in the comments, because I read them all and I want to see what you guys are learning. And other people come here, they read those comments, they pick up tools. What we're trying to do is arm ourselves with a way to break out so we're not just constantly fighting back at these clouds, but we're thriving and we're passing that light on to other people. That's the point of what the whole thing is. Like and subscribe if you didn't already. I hope that this or whatever else arms you with something good to go out into the week and you have a great time, and that light is shining in and the clouds are just these little wisps at the side. All right, thanks for hanging out.